All right, in this screencast, we are going to talk about ceramics, and I have a lot of different pictures of ceramics here. And so ceramics are there are just so many definitions for ceramics, and so the first thing we're going to do is give ourselves a working definition here. So when we talk about ceramics, these are just inorganic materials made by heating clay or other mineral matter to a high temperature where the particles melt and fuse together. So this is some sort of soft material that can be molded, and then when you heat it up, it hardens into a shape. And so when we think of ceramics, we may think of kind of up here pottery. We may think of, and I've got a couple pictures of pottery. We may think of, all right, ceramic in vests. We might think of dental implants. Those are ceramics. And then we also have things like ceramic cutlery. So there's a lot of ceramics, a lot of things that fall under that ceramic umbrella. Most of what we're going to talk about are artifacts and things like pots and in the art form. So ceramics are some of the earliest artifacts that really have been uncovered. And one of the reasons for this is ancient civilizations used dried clays for food storage and cooking vessels. And what they discovered is that heat improved the properties of clay pots. Now, experimentation and improvement of heating techniques led to the development of ceramics technology. And so we're going to look at some early ceramic pieces in the next few. Sorry if there's a little bit of a jump there. I went too far. So some of the early heating technologies came from kind of this area in Jordan here. And so this is an example of one of those pieces. This piece is a limestone plaster statue. Right? And its approximate date is 8,500 to 5,500 BC. And so we know people were using clays to make art as far back as 8,500 BC. Now, there are Neolithic potteries that have been found in slides well. And so here are some other examples of that. In Iran or Mesopotamia in the 6th to 5th century, millennia, BC. These were some pottery pieces that were found and statues. This was found in Egypt in the 4th millennia BC. And I always find it interesting. These are found in close proximity when we think about the world. And look at the difference that we see with the time frame. Right now we have designs. We have a pot with designs on them. When we look at this, it just really amazes me how quickly pottery and ceramic arts advanced in that time period. So let's put some words to what I showed you. They've dated kind of the earliest there is 15,000 to 11,000 BC. They've recovered some burnt ceramics from the Nile Valley in Egypt. Right. In 5000 BC, we started to get some crude earthenware. That was glazed with an alkaline glaze. In Egypt. Okay. Now, I want to remind you, glaze is, we talked about that in the glass chapter, but that's just a glass coating. And a lot of times that is what gives the pottery its color, our metals in the glaze. 3000 BC, Chinese pottery, wheels, right? Clay molds started to appear. And then in 1000 BC, porcelain, so there was Chinese porcelain that's been recovered, which is a really fine pottery, and then Greek pottery as well. Right, so you can see kind of the different dates and the different regions historically. Egyptian faience is a type of pottery that showed up here about 1000 to 716 BC. It's a tin glazed earthenware. And glaze was just a huge development. And so this glaze had tin in it, which is what gave the colors here. And so if it's faience, it's got this tin glaze to give this really pretty blue color. It started to show up in jewelry, right? So we've got the rolled beads here, as well as statues and other pieces of artifacts that have been recovered from that era. When we look at what a glaze would consist of, if we have a self-glazing ceramic, basically when you heat the ceramic up, right, the glaze is going to form. I want to point out, here's that nepheline syenite that's showing up again. We talked about that in our glass module, and the composite of that. Flint, ball clay, kaolin, and then we've got some sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate here. We're going to talk about ball clay and kaolin later and what they consist of, but I wanted to point that out. Now, low-fired ceramics, a lot of times are referred to during this time. They're fired about 900 to 1,000 degrees Celsius. Here's the corresponding temperature in Fahrenheit. And what I want to point out here is I want to point out the glazes again. We have chromium oxide, gives us this really pretty yellow color. Copper carbonate as a glaze on top of pottery or ceramics gives us this really pretty blue color. So the glass glaze is what's giving us this color. Now, here's some early Egyptian glazed ceramics. This is a glazed tile, about 1295 to 1186 BC is when that's dated. So it's was a ceramic that was carved and glazed and fired. And so you can look at the intricate detail. This is a glazed wig from about that same time period. And so now we see we've got multiple colors for our glazes as well. The pigment development that came out of Egypt, when we talked about our pigments, that was one of the places historically where a lot of our early pigments came from. So it's not surprising that those early pigments were mixed into glazes and used on ceramics. So I want to just kind of give us 3 working definitions as we go through the rest of this module. So we talk about ceramics. These are just inorganic materials. Right? And it is a clay that is heated at high or to high temperatures, right? And when that happens, the particles melt and fuse, right? The big thing here that's different from glass is it starts soft. So when we think about glass, it starts as a hard material and we heat it and it starts to flow and it becomes molten, and that's when we shape it. Here, this starts soft at room temperature. We mold it, and then when it's fired or heated, that's when it hardens. Okay. These generally contain one or more metallic elements with non-metallic elements. It's usually oxygen. Right? They also contain primarily ionic bonds. Right? Now, when we talk about pottery, pottery is just a form of ceramics. So you're going to hear me talk about pottery, but understand that that's under the umbrella of ceramics there. Some of the sources use these interchangeably, but I'm going to use ceramics as a broad term and pottery as a form of ceramics that's underneath that. Some sources say it only involves clay, but that's a debated thing. And then glazes are just layers of colored glass that has been melted onto the surface of pottery and ceramics. Right? And the glaze itself, so pottery, when we talk about ceramics and the clay itself, the clay runs from kind of red to brown, okay? So if you have pottery that is a different color other than red or brown, then there's something in the glaze that has given it its color. So a lot of times it will give color to the piece, and a lot of times these glazes contain, right, metals, ions, let's say metal ions, right, that can give those colors. And we're going to talk about that more later in this module.